We are in a banking crisis, and we don't know where it's going.
When you see one cockroach, there are probably more.
I think that the financials are really at risk here, the most since 2008.
So I think it's crazy that no one is talking about this. Just 2 years after the collapse of Signature, Silicon Valley, and First Republic Bank, a new banking crisis is starting to make its way through the markets. Except this time, it's not just the banks that are in trouble. It's the entire financial system cracking from the inside out. After all, most people don't realize that the banking system is currently sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of unrealized losses. Regulators have just allowed them to borrow even more money to stay afloat. And even though it looks like everything's currently fine with the market surging higher, these losses don't just magically disappear. In fact, even the CEO of JP Morgan warned that more cockroaches will emerge. That is why it is crucial to understand exactly what's going on, what this means for you, which banks are most at risk, and then most importantly, how you could put yourself in the best position possible. Because there is a lot more going on than most people realize. Although really quick, if you find this helpful, it would mean the world to me if you hit the like button or subscribed if you haven't done that already. Yes, I really dislike asking for it, but it does help out tremendously, and as a thank you for doing that, here's a video of Bailey getting a treat. So thanks so much, and also a big thank you to the Gemini credit card for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. Alright, so on the surface, all of this starts with the original banking crisis, which I'll do my best to break down in under a minute, because as it stands right now, the banking system operates on what's called fractional reserve banking. This means that banks are only required to keep 10% of customer deposits accessible for withdrawal at all times. And if that sounds confusing, imagine it like this. You give me $1,000 to hold on to for safekeeping, but I could turn around and give $900 of that to somebody else, who gives $810 to somebody else, who gives $729 to somebody else. Under this situation, banks hope that enough people give them $1,000 so that when the first person wants their $1,000 back in its entirety, they have the money on hand to be able to return. The benefit here is that this allows people like you and I greater access to borrowing capital. It allows us to earn interest on our deposits. But it also relies on us having faith that the entire system works, and also not asking for all of our money back at the exact same time. Of course, to be fair, in most cases, banks are not taking your money and lending it to banks who lend it to banks who lend it to banks, but instead, they loan a small portion of that money out to other people, and then they invest the rest of it in very safe and stable assets. This ensures that as long as those investments are held to maturity, the bank gets a guaranteed return on their capital, you get paid back interest, and everything works swimmingly. Until it doesn't. For example, between 2020 and 2022, interest rates were held at 0% as a way for the economy to grow during a time when everything was shut down, and all of that money funneled back into the banking industry. In this case, though, US banks had so much money and interest rates were so low that a huge chunk of their deposits went into buying low-yield US treasuries, which plummeted in value as soon as the Fed began raising interest rates. Now, in a normal market, this wouldn't be that big of a concern because the banks still technically have your money. It's just illiquid until those loans mature. But small banks are the exception, and when their customers began withdrawing their money at the exact same time, that caused a liquidity crisis, which eventually resulted in 3 banks completely collapsing. What does that have to do with today, you might ask? Well, just like the banks of 2023 had significant amount of money locked up in low-yield treasuries, which have plummeted in value, today the banks have their money tied up in another asset that's also not doing that well, and that would be commercial real estate. See, during a time when treasuries were paying you next to nothing and bank deposits barely paid you 1% if you were lucky, commercial real estate was booming because you could take a loan for 1 to 2% and go and buy a property that makes 3 to 5%. However, now that interest rates have increased, there is a problem. Commercial real estate values are plummeting, with Morgan Stanley previously having estimated that this segment of the market could decline by as much as 40%, which is the same magnitude as we saw during the 2008 financial crisis. Why is this such a bad deal for banks? Well, as CNN previously explained, US banks hold about $2.7 trillion in commercial real estate loans, and about 80% of that is held by smaller regional banks, the ones the US government has not classified as too big to fail. Now, unlike most residential real estate loans that you and I would get when going and buying a house, commercial real estate loans are only fixed for a short period of time, and then the interest rate resets after 3 to 7 years, kind of like the introductory rate financing of 2006. And according to the data firm Trip, more than $2.2 trillion will come due between now and the end of 2027, and regional banks could have problems collecting on those loans. After all, commercial real estate values are almost entirely dependent on 2 factors: how much the property makes, and how high interest rates are. As an example of this, just imagine that we have a $1 million building that makes $60,000 a year, which is a 6% return. If interest rates then decline to 1%, that building could sell for $1.5 million, or a 4% return, since you could borrow at 1% to make 3%. But if interest rates spike to 6%, that building could only be worth $666,000, or a 9% return, since you'd now have to borrow at a higher interest rate to make the same 3% profit. So why is this math creating a banking panic? Well, here's where things get very interesting. When large investors go out and buy commercial deals, they often prefer to work with smaller regional banks because those are the companies that'll give them better deals. Because of that relationship, they're often willing to underwrite deals a lot more often based on trust rather than just the spreadsheet. That results in more flexible financing, better terms, and the willingness to take on slightly riskier loans. A lot of riskier loans. In fact, as you can see right here, regional banks have some of the highest exposure to commercial real estate, with in some cases, half of their assets being allocated towards properties that may or may not be worth what they've loaned. Or to put this more simply, a lot of commercial real estate has declined over the last few years. We have over $1 trillion worth of debt about to come due by the end of 2025. And just months before these properties are due to be refinanced, loans are already starting to default. So what does this mean for you, the banking system, and your money? And most importantly, is this something to actually worry about? Well, here's the honest truth. Whether it's commercial real estate losses, treasury losses, or just another temporary liquidity issue, the fact is, banks always do everything they can to protect themselves first. Meanwhile, what do you get? A checking account that barely pays you any interest? That's why more investment firms have started advocating for alternative investments that are not correlated with the rest of the market, like Bitcoin. And with their sponsor, the Gemini credit card, you get to earn cryptocurrency back instantly every time you purchase, turning your everyday expenses into something that's completely different from traditional rewards. For example, with this, you get to earn up to 4% back on transportation, 3% back on dining, 2% on groceries, and 1% on everything else with no annual fee. Plus, Bitcoin rewards earned and held in the Gemini credit card have actually appreciated 277% on average. This makes it easy to gain a little exposure to cryptocurrency without having to buy it or try to time the market. Plus, it comes in 5 unique stainless steel colors. You could get black, silver, rose gold, Bitcoin orange, or the brand new XRP edition. All you have to do is swipe your card like you would normally, and that's it. I've literally earned Bitcoin back anytime I go to the grocery store or when I fill up the car with gas. It's that simple. And if Bitcoin isn't your thing, you could also choose from 50 different options that you could switch to at any time. Feel free to check out the description, by the way, for more information on rates and fees and see if you're eligible with no impact to your credit score. So if you'd like to earn cryptocurrency back instantly every time you purchase, check out the link down below in the description or sign up at gemini.com/Graham. And as a special bonus, they'll give you $200 worth of Bitcoin when you spend $3,000 in the first 90 days. Again, that link is down below. Thank you so much. And now let's get back to the video. All right, so in terms of what's going on today, let's talk about the banking crisis. As it stands right now, most of the panic was due to Zion's bank disclosing a $50 million charge-off on 2 loans due to borrower fraud. While at the same time, Western Alliance revealed a fraud-related lawsuit sparking concerns that bad loans among smaller banks could be a lot more common than we expect. In fact, the CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, went on record to say that when there's one cockroach, there are probably more. And the situation was so severe that banks had to tap into overnight liquidity for a second time in a row, something that we haven't seen since the 2020 pandemic. On top of that, even the investment bank Jeffries told its investors that it might experience millions of dollars of losses from its business with bankrupt auto parts company First Brands. How is this allowed to happen? Well, get this. In 2008, rules were put in place that would prevent banks from making riskier loans. But banks found out that if they just loaned that money to someone else and that person made the riskier loans, everything was okay. And as a result of that, this loan industry had been booming. However, even though there's been over $1 trillion worth of loans issued in this capacity, often without sufficient capital, it's unclear exactly how much exposure smaller banks have and to what type of losses. Like, one analyst went on record to say that, "I don't know how it was so easy for a bank to think they had 50 million in collateral and find out that they had 0. This resulted in the entire market beginning to sell off, bank concerns coming back into the picture, and a lot of people wondering if this could happen to banks. Am I going to be at risk? Well, here's the truth. Right now it's looking like there's a huge difference between large national banks like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan, and so on, and regional banks, which only service a small area. And the biggest difference comes down to how well they've diversified their portfolios. For national banks, it's become very apparent that they are flush with cash. They've been stress tested to withstand a 33% drop in commercial real estate prices. On top of that, it's also worth mentioning that these large banks have the resources to absorb any sort of losses from within the market. And even if something did happen, they're mostly deemed as too big to fail by the Federal Reserve. On the other hand, smaller banks do have a lot more exposure to commercial real estate, and even though some of those losses might not be the end of the world, it is expected that these banks are going to be a lot more cautious about who they lend money to, and people are going to scrutinize their loans a lot more closely than they did in the past. However, in terms of whether or not these loans are anything to be concerned about, Moody's just went on record to say that the banking system and private credit markets are sound, and that one cockroach does not a trend make. That's a typo, by the way. I'm sure they meant to say doesn't make a trend. Anyway, in terms of banking failures, they also said that default rates on high-yield debt this year has been relatively low, holding under 5%, and are expected to drift down below 3% in 2026. By comparison, during the 2008 financial crisis, defaults on high-yield debt were in the low double digits. Although even with all that said, it seems as though Congress is at least aware of the issues brewing beneath the surface, although instead of actually fixing the core problems here, they've decided to issue a new proposal that would raise the FDIC limits from $250,000 all the way to $10 million as a way to protect customers. So in terms of what I think, personally, it seems like this is a slight overreaction. And in terms of the stock market, it just seems like a lot of investors are very worried about overvaluations in the market and are really looking for any reason to begin selling off, especially as this occurs during a time where we have a government shutdown, issues with China, and gold prices are skyrocketing. But in terms of the banking crisis, look, I just never think it's a good idea to keep more than the FDIC insured limit of usually $250,000 at any bank at any given time, especially if it's a smaller bank. These are just good habits to practice, and even though the situation is probably a bit overblown, it seems contained, and it seems as though a lot of them have the liquidity to backstop losses, unless there is a major catastrophe, we're probably fine. Although in the big picture, it's all just a good reminder why you shouldn't have all of your eggs in one basket. It's probably a good idea to have multiple bank accounts in good standing that you could use if you absolutely need it. And at the end of the day, things could still happen completely outside of your control, even if on paper you're doing everything right. That's why I personally just feel safer with larger banks like JP Morgan, Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. Did I say Bank of America, Schwab, and so on? I spread my money throughout as many different places as possible, just in case something happens to one. And even though banks are holding on to some rather significant losses, as interest rates come back down, these should begin to normalize, and over time it's going to balance out. But then again, what do I know? I'm just a random dude making videos in a half-converted garage on YouTube, and I could be totally wrong. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. I will do my best to read and reply to as many of you as I can. Hit the like button, subscribe. Thank you so much, and until next time.